There's a new bill circulating around Congress that claims to crack down on exploiting children online. But critics say it's just the government's latest attempt to chip away at our privacy. This is the Daily Charge. It's Tuesday, March 10th. I'm Roger Chang, and with me via Skype is Alfred Ng.
Hi.
Alfred, you've got a nice explainer on the ERNIT Act, and you got to break this down for me because it is extremely dense. First off, what does the ERNIT Act propose?
Yeah, you're right. It is extremely dense, but what the ERNIT Act is proposing is basically making tech companies earn Section 230 protections. Now, Section 230 is a part of the Communications Decency Act in 1996, where it basically protects platforms from being sued for content that's posted on their platform. So if I'm a restaurant and somebody leaves a bad review for me on Yelp, I can't sue Yelp for that. I would have to sue the person that actually posted that. So it's a big part of what allows tech platforms to grow and also what allows for free expression online. So that is what they're proposing. They're saying you have to follow these standards to protecting children online, or you do not get this protection that would basically keep your website alive.
And that's kind of a deal breaker for tech companies, right? If you don't have Section 230 protection, you're basically just it's open game in terms of lawsuits. Like basically companies could not function without this protection, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, like think about how many posts are on Facebook a day, and I think there's something along the lines of like 1 billion hours of video is being watched on YouTube every day. Now think about like how many lawsuits could come from that, and there's a very good chance they could lose these lawsuits and they would be shut down like immediately. Or if you're like a new website like looking to start out, and you all of a sudden are liable for all of this because you don't meet these standards. It's not really much of a guideline or best practices so much as it is basically if you don't do this, you're done.
So let's take us through what are those guidelines and what exactly is the government proposing in this instance?
So the guidelines are not established by this bill. The guidelines are going to be established by a commission established by this bill, where the three of the members are the heads of the Justice Department, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Homeland Security. That is where the issue really comes in for a lot of privacy and security experts, because the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department have spent many years basically trying to get rid of end-to-end encryption, saying that it prevents them from catching criminals, it prevents them from being able to solve investigations. And, in the past, the Justice Department had this battle with the FBI over encryption for terrorists. And then before that, they were saying, drug dealers are using this online and we can't catch these drug kingpins because of that. So those arguments clearly didn't work because, we're still afforded end-to-end encryption and tech companies have not really buckled to those pressures. But now with the ERNIT Act, the idea is they're going at this from the angle of child exploitation, which is a much harder political angle to fight against, right? What legislator is going to go out there and say, no, I actually support,
the exploitation of children online. Yeah, that's what's fascinating to me is because there's this different goal, and the goal is never outright stated, right? It's ultimately what they want to do is to insert a government backdoor into Facebook, Apple, various systems, but it's never outright ever said. And it's interesting, like the press conferences that have been scheduled, the kind of public statements that have been made have all been about the exploitation of children online and how to prevent that. And it's interesting the way it's spun because you're right, politically, you can't be on the other side of that argument, right? That just doesn't make any sense. Like you can never win that argument by saying, "Yeah, I'm for that." That just doesn't work, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why so many tech policy experts have been looking at this and thinking this actually does have a pretty good chance of getting momentum on Capitol Hill. And I think they're right to point out the security risks and the privacy risks here, because encryption is what protects your communications, not only from being viewed by people who have stolen your phone or potential hackers, but also government regimes. And the idea that the government has been trying to propose is, they can't do these investigations when things are encrypted, and they want lawful access, which is basically give us a special key that only police officers or only investigators can use to decrypt these messages. But that kind of falls short when you look at all these government data leaks that have happened, and cybersecurity tools that have been stolen from the NSA and the CIA, where were also tools that were only meant to be used by the government and like have been used by malicious hackers because it's out of the public.
Right. When the government says, trust us, we'll make sure this back door is safe and only used by us. It's hard to buy that argument given there have been a lot of examples where that hasn't been the case, right?
Yeah, and that is definitely like the biggest argument against lawful access. They had a hearing about this in December where Apple had basically told Congress, look, like we can't make a key just for the good guys. Like that's not how that works. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. On Capitol Hill, there's definitely a lot of noise about it from privacy and security advocates, but also, there are organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children backing this bill. And I think like 7 out of the 10 senators that are backing this bill are on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which will be having a hearing on this bill tomorrow.
Right, and it's important to note this is not a partisan issue. There are senators and representatives on sort of both sides, both parties that support this bill.
I believe it's 4 Republicans and 6 Democrats that are sponsoring this bill.
Right, so there's a rare instance where we do have these 2 parties who agree on an issue. I guess what's interesting to me is, beyond beyond the spinning, like. It's interesting that they're taking this tack now because, I think back in 2016, we saw this before, right, with Apple versus the FBI, where there was a big battle there. FBI wanted some sort of way to get into the iPhone. Apple refused. And it's really kind of when it crystallized Apple's kind of big pitch on security and privacy as a feature in its products. And clearly, in the court of public opinion, the need for security and sort of end-to-end encryption for these services kind of won out. So it's just that's why it's interesting to me that they're taking this different tact and really going after or making this an issue about protecting children as opposed to having backdoor access for the good guys, quote unquote.
Yeah, we started seeing that angle around the time Facebook said that they were going to start encrypting their messaging services, because Facebook is responsible for reporting about 16.8 million cases back in 2018 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So the idea was that if you're going to encrypt these messages, that is a big way that child predators get in touch with kids and, groom them into, meeting them later on and things like that. And if you're encrypting these messages, you're not going to be getting these kinds of signals, and you're not going to be able to stop these pedophiles using Facebook Messenger.
Right.
So that is around the time when I saw like this new front and this new angle from the Justice Department. And I think the fallacy surrounding that, from what tech policy experts have told me, is that yes, it's true that Facebook gives like 16 to 18 million reports like per year, but the difference would be that not much of that is actually enforced. So they'll give them these reports, but like this center is not like a law enforcement agency. They just give that to the cops after, and it's very like it's not clear how much of that is actually acted on. There was a New York Times report about Facebook not being able to handle all of these child exploitation posts or ramping up like a severe amount, and how much they've reported. But I think the problem still comes down to the federal government like doesn't have the funding or resources to actually tackle that. So even if they provided a backdoor to encryption here, or followed these guidelines, whatever they might be, I think it still boils down to the question of, does this actually protect children? And unless you have investigators and resources that can actually use that kind of access,
that's a good point.
It doesn't really seem to, yeah.
All right, so this is a sensitive and dense subject. We've done our best to condense it, make it easy for you to digest. But if you're still confused or have more specific questions about Section 230, exactly what lawful access is or end-to-end encryption, feel free to sound off. We want to know where you think the cutoff is between security and privacy. And we're also taking comments from YouTube, Twitter, Periscope. So go ahead, sound off with whatever curiosities you have. BVG?
First one is coming in from Eric, and this is pretty much what is on everybody's mind anyway. He just says they use the kid angle so no one would be against it. It's not going to be that simple overall. Alfred, what is your kind of response to that without getting too editorial?
Yeah, I mean, people that I've spoken with, or and chatter that I've seen about this on Twitter have brought up kind of the irony of this situation where, they're literally exploiting kids to get this bill passed that is saying we want to stop child exploitation. Um, it's a I it's very bleak to think about that, and obviously I think that child sexual exploitation online is awful, and I think everyone who supports encryption agrees with that. And I think that there are other ways to solve for that problem without having to get rid of encryption. I mean, in the same way that when this was about terrorism and when this was about drug dealing, the San Bernardino terrorists, they unlocked their phones using, software from, I believe, an Israeli like cybersecurity
Yeah.
company that said, "Hey, we have the key. We know how to break into this iPhone," and that actually happens with the Manhattan DA's office as well, where the Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance is very anti-encryption, and he always like points out like, look, we have 5,000 iPhones from drug dealers that we can't get any data off of because of encryption. We need a backdoor. But the thing is, like, there are reports and FOIA requests that have shown that their office also uses like these tools. So on the child angle now, like Facebook talks about how like despite the fact that they're not like they're going to be encrypting Messenger, there are other signs and metadata that you can use to pick up signals of like, oh, this is probably a child predator. Like, I don't know, like how often he messages like random like kids from a high school, or how often they message, or like how often they're blocked, or like their friend request is denied. Like there are like other signs
Mm.
beyond just like getting the direct message itself, like if even if it's encrypted.
There you go.
Very good. Next, let's talk to Timothy. Timothy is always in the chat. Timothy, you're one of my favorites. I mean, I love all of you guys, but Timothy always comes up with really good questions, which makes my job easier. So, whatever happened to free speech in terms of Yelp? Now, this is a little off into left field, but it's relevant. What's the borderline for the lawsuit for defamation? Does that include terms? Is that included in the terms of service? And who actually reads those kind of things word for word? Now, like I said, it's a little bit off in left field, but it's not completely disjointed. How do you guys take that?
I remember I know the Yelp lawsuit you're talking about. I'm not sure how it ended up, but I mean there has been a lot of talk about Section 230 reform just
Hmm.
because of the major ways that the internet has changed in the last like 24 years. I know that a case that I had been following pretty closely about Grindr was basically, a lot of like sexual abuse advocates were saying, not advocates, I'm sorry, you know what I mean. But we're saying, so the lawsuit goes, and I wrote about this like last year, where somebody had used Grindr to make a ton of fake profiles of his, or just one fake profile of his ex-boyfriend, and then was meet like messaging all of these people saying like, hey, I like to be like surprised and hurt, so this is my address, can you come, like, do you want to come have sex with me? And so the guy who's being abused because of this was saying like, hey, Grinder's allowing this to happen,
Mm.
I'm suing Grinder for this. Grinder said, no, we're protected by Section 230, you can't sue us, you have to sue the person that is doing this. But I think the lawsuit I believe is still going on, but it was turned down at first, and it's like it's being appealed over more and more courts. But yeah, they've used the Section 230 defense to say we don't have to do anything. Like, you should be suing this person, not us. Even though Grinder can do better things like spotting fake profiles and getting rid of them. I think that's the idea where, like, since 1996, like obviously tech platforms have become uh, a way for people to abuse them and use them in ways that the platforms did not anticipate, and they're not really responsible for protecting anybody because of Section 230. So Section 230 like allows for free speech online, and it allows you to say like, I hate. this video, and these people are idiots. But like I think at the same time, it also allows for like rampant abuse that platforms really haven't been able to tackle that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. I mean, when Section 230 was introduced, I believe it's by Senator Ron Wyden, uh,
Mhm.
it was a different time, 96. We were far more innocent about the internet. It was about, I don't know, just sharing viral stuff. It's definitely not to the point where it is now, where people are actually weaponizing the platform and really exploiting it to hurt people. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of talk. There should be discussion about whether or not Section 230 protections should be the default and what we should do with it. I don't necessarily know if this ERNIT Act is the way to go, but there's definitely a lot of discussion, and folks are talking about re-examining. I think Bernie Sanders has said he'd want to get rid of Section 230.
I'm glad you brought
I
that
don't think
up.
he. No, no, no. Senator Sanders doesn't want to get rid of it. I think he wants to revisit it
Revisit.
and
Sorry,
maybe tweak it.
got it.
Joe Biden is the one that says he
Sorry,
wants it revoked.
I mixed up the two old dudes. My bad.
Hey, it happens. I'm actually glad you guys brought that all up because as the resident dummy in the room, it just seems to me like 230 is an extremely vague and exploitable act. Am I wrong in that perspective? I mean, educate me here.
I don't know if it's
I
vague.
mean,
I don't know if it's vague. It's definitely powerful in the kind of protections it offers.
It just seems very exploitable, though. It just seems like the kind of thing that's just asking for gray areas and,
I think it's
I think,
become
I mean,
it's become like that. Go ahead, Alfred.
yeah, I think a part of it though is that like it relies on free market, right? So, MySpace doesn't have to do anything to protect people from being harassed there, but like we saw that happen and then like everyone just kind of left MySpace. Like Twitter like obviously has a lot of safety features and guidelines that they have, but the idea is like they shouldn't be sued for it, and like you're looking at it more from a free market approach where if there are too many like Nazis on Twitter, like people will just leave Twitter, and that's why they have all their like safety features and allows you to mute people and all that stuff. But like the idea is like they shouldn't be. Section 230 is basically saying like you're allowed to leave there, but like you're not. If you're gonna sue off of that, you should sue the platform. I mean, you should sue the person behind it, not the platform.
Yeah, I mean the counter argument though, particularly like with a platform like Facebook, is it's hard to leave, right? Like the free market argument of like, well, if you don't like it here, just leave. For a lot of folks, it's like their lifeline to a lot of family, friends that they've got a network built there, and it's hard to leave, and then now you sort of got to endure this situation.
Yeah, I mean that's the other part of it too. So in the Grinder case, the guy that was being abused through it, he wasn't even on Grinder. Like he doesn't
Oh,
he didn't use it. He
right.
deleted it after he met like this guy and they were dating for a little bit and then it didn't work out and then so he didn't even know that he was being abused via Grinder until somebody who came thinking that it was his profile like told him like no,
Oh,
this is your profile.
wow.
see,
Yeah,
that's scary stuff.
that's
And
totally messed up.
the next place I want to go with this conversation, however, is now this is a U.S. bill being introduced by Lindsey Graham, Feinstein. Feinstein? Is that
Yeah,
her name?
fine.
Yeah,
Fein-
this is the ERNIT Act. This is the one we've been talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an American bill. How does this impact internationally? So like I think WhatsApp was referenced in your story, right, Alfred? That's a major social network that uses end-to-end encryption, is notorious for it. How does this impact the international audience, if at all?
Yeah, that's going to be extremely interesting. So, like right now, there's the Cloud Act, which basically allows for the UK government and to request for data from like US, like the US government and kind of vice versa. So, if the encryption is kind of broken, then they're able to get that data like in the UK. Australia also has its own like anti-encryption bill and I haven't seen any international cases with that yet, but I think what you're saying is right in that, like, if they provide for a backdoor, like, the point is that like they're not going to use this just for child exploitation cases, right? So like, let's say these guidelines say, oh, you have to give lawful access to meet like these child safety guidelines. do you think all of a sudden, like these investigators that have been wanting it for terrorist cases and wanting it for drug cases for all these years will say, oh, well, no, that access is only for like child abuse investigations? No. So it's basically going to be, oh, there's an opening now. We can get data from that. We're gonna do that, and that's the same way that like governments around the world would are going to be looking at the any backdoor coming from like a U.S. legislation, because they'll say, okay, well, you gave the U.S. government access, and if you
Mm.
want to operate in our country, you also have to give us access.
All right, we've got some time left here, not too much, but we still got plenty of questions and comments floating in. Let's go ahead and talk to Will Berry. This is a really good one, Alfred. You're going to like this one. Couldn't criminals just create their own app that's end-to-end encrypted and then just kind of sideload APK?
That is definitely the argument that tech companies have also been making, where when they were testifying to Congress in December, I believe this was Facebook's argument that, if you like force us to put a backdoor door encryption, they are just going to move to other apps in other countries where it could be shadier there, where, with us, we are actively cooperating with you and we are giving you all this data that we have, and we're developing methods to be able to give you the data that we do have and that is not encrypted. And if you force us to move our encryption, to make a backdoor for it, criminals are just going to move to other platforms, and they're not going to exactly comply with you the same way that we are.
Very true.
Yeah.
Do tech companies use the same encryption as the banks?
I don't really know what that means. So like there's different kinds of encryption protocols, and I don't think everyone uses the same one, but I think the concept of it being end-to-end encrypted is like what's the most important thing. So like there's like different modes, types of encryption. End-to-end encryption would be the most secure one, where it's like encrypted all the way throughout, which I believe that is what most banks are using. At least I would hope so. But like iMessage uses end-to-end encryption,
Mm.
so does Signal, but like there's other communications where it's just encrypted at rest, which means that, while it's transferring through the internet, like it's not encrypted there.
And here's one coming in from Stu Shepard on Periscope. He says, is being, well, this is more of a rhetorical, but I figure you got a good angle on this, Alfred. Is being anonymous really considered free speech?
Um, I don't know what that means. Um,
I
I
think
mean, are
it's.
you talking?
I mean, I think it's
Yeah, sorry.
I think it's the right to be anonymous as opposed to the right to. And I don't know if it's a free speech argument, but there's a right to privacy. I think that's probably the
Yeah,
closer argument that he's shooting for. I don't, but it's not a
I mean,
free speech issue.
yeah, they have looked at like facial recognition, for example, right? Like facial recognition is being looked at as kind of like an attack on free speech as well, where
Mm,
you have a right to be anonymous in public, I guess, where if you're at a protest, right? Um, and you're against like a specific, you're exercising your right to free speech.
right.
But like, let's say facial recognition is deployed on that protest. Now they know who everyone at that protest is, and they're able to track them down and say like, oh, hey, look, this guy who's a reporter for CNET was at this protest about like some political issue. Like, let's like then like you're less like you're more discouraged to go to protest or exercise your free speech rights because
Mm.
it's like tied to your name.
And here's one from Eric on YouTube. He says, I've said this all along. Any legislation made by people that don't understand what an IP address is worthless. It's a good subject, but you have to see where this could end up. And Alfred, go ahead and hit us with the doom and gloom. What is kind of the worst case scenario here?
I mean, yes and no. Like yes, like the legislation might not be of value, but like you have to understand that like these are elected officials, and they don't like, even if they don't know what the technology is, and I'm not saying that they don't, even if they don't know it, like they are the ones that can get it through, right? Like they're the ones making these kinds of decisions. So that would be the bigger concern about it. And like you can say that it's worthless, but like they're also the ones that can turn this into a law. And as far as like worst case scenarios go, I mean, I think it's kind of laid out pretty flat there where, the standards that they establish would most likely include creating a backdoor to encryption. And if that happens in the US, that like basically puts a lot of activists and, security folks like in danger.
Got it. Okay, we are right at the tipping point here and just about out of time. A couple of concerned citizens are wondering if, Roger, are you okay out there being all alone? Are you quarantined?
I'm quarantined here by myself. If you notice, we haven't had a co-host for a while, so
Yeah.
I'm here in this little bubble. No, I'm braving mass transit to bring this show to you guys, so I'm okay for now. I have the sniffles, which I'm afraid people are thinking is coronavirus. It's not. I just have a lot of allergies. If you've listened for a long time, you realize that.
Oh, yeah, it's very true. Okay, so before we wrap things up, definitely want to say thank you to Alfred for calling in today and making time for us. Before we do shut it down now, that there is a hearing tomorrow, right? And we're going to be able to see that. We've got the link
Yeah, it's
to that.
happening at 10 a.m.
Yep, 10 a.m. Eastern, and I've got the link in the description. Anybody out there listening or watching want to be curious and see where they go with this. We all know that those Senate Judiciary hearings are always so riveting to watch, but this is an important one. If you do have a chance tomorrow, we wouldn't hate you if you skipped our show to watch the keynote, or not the keynote, the hearing. But yeah, again, that'll be in the description. So a lot of people have actually been using our silly little voicemail thing, and that's kind of fun.
Hey.
Thanks to everybody for using that. We're going to sit on a few of these for a while because they're very topic-centric. So, like, there's one about drones and TikTok, and there's a really good follow-up for security dongles after yesterday's episode with Stephen Shankland. So next time we come back full circle on those topics, we'll bring those in. But for the time being, I couldn't help myself. I just wanted to listen to this one from our buddy Steve, because everybody needs a little pick-me-up once in a while.
Hey guys, it's Steve BW again from Twitter. This is my last voicemail, I promise. I'm sorry for pummeling your inbox. I just wanted to let you know that you guys do a great job, and we love you here in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and Canada.
Awesome.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
A little thing like that does go a long way, but don't worry, we're not going to just kind of sit on and pat ourselves on the back. There's actually good questions coming through, but like I said, we're going to sit on them until another episode when they are a little more relevant. This one we wanted to stay focused because it is so dense. And again, thank you to Alfred for bringing that to the table today. And until tomorrow, everyone take care. Have a great one. And Roger, go ahead and send us out.
Yeah, and before we go, we'd ask you to please go ahead, like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell if you wouldn't mind. If we missed something here today or you couldn't catch the live show and have a burning question, leave us a voicemail at 862-250-5173. If you want to learn more about today's topics, you can check the links to all of today's stories in the description below. For the Daily Charge, I'm Roger Chang. Thanks for joining us.
Can't get enough? Check out the Daily Supercharge, our extended post show with special features, audience Q&A, and in-depth reviews. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.